I remember the first time that I went to start taking computer science 101.
Right.
My
Oh yeah.
professor was so slow that I was like, oh, if I need to do this like for all these quarters, I'm gonna be exhausted.
It's
And
painful. It is very painful to learn
it's
cybersecurity.
yeah, well, no, computers by
Well,
itself.
computer science is mind numbing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to realize this is not everybody's in it, and that's one thing that, yes, we have technology all over, but
Mhm.
some people just they just want to grab it and just go. I just
Yeah.
want that thing to work, and then I go to work, and I totally get it
Hmm.
because and throughout my career, I've seen genius in chemistry, genius in PhDs, master bioscientology people that
Hmm.
they love what they do, and that's what we do. We love what we do, and that's what we do,
Right.
or else we wouldn't really,
We wouldn't do
because
it. That's true.
it's so frustrating in a way.
Hmm.
You look at people just installing. I remember software that it doesn't work for 200 times and say, well, you have to love this. That's the only way you do
Right.
it.
Right.
So that's
Mhm.
important to kind of differentiate that and make sure that they understand it. Sometimes the best way to get a breakthrough is, okay, so what do? You do this job. Okay, relate that security to that job that they do and what the risks they're taking if they don't do let's say construction. What is the first thing that you do when you go into a construction site? Okay, you put your yellow hat on because that's the
Yeah.
best
Put a
way.
hard hat on to protect your head, right? So,
Exactly. No, so the same thing with security. This is what you need to do in order for you to be protected on that.
hello and welcome to the Smarter Online Safety Show. I'm your host, Jocelyn King, the queen of online safety. Hello and welcome to the Smarter Online Safety Show. I'm your host, Jocelyn King, the Queen of Online Safety, and I've got a very special guest for you today. Alex Sansevieri has over 20 years of experience in information technology, including as an IT manager in the medical field, helping protect patient records and sensitive laboratory data. So he knows about protections of data from the bad guys. And he focuses on making technology to help support organizations rather than the other way around. He holds an MCSE and ITIL certifications, but he says that cybersecurity isn't a product you buy, it's a culture you build together. I love that. And as he told me, when we educate ourselves, we protect our own interests, but when we share our experiences and our near misses with each other, we close the gaps for everyone. So whether you're a CEO or a parent at the dinner table, your biggest contribution to safety isn't a software update. It's an open conversation. And that's what we're going to have here today. So welcome, Alex.
Yeah,
Great to
thank
have
you
you.
very much. Thank you very much for having me. This has been it's been very long career, but very well done. And to be honest with you, I definitely enjoy every minute of it. And the reason why is because we actually spread seeds all over the place all the time. So which that's a great thing,
Yeah. And when you plant
Uh,
seeds, they grow.
oh,
There you go.
they
Yeah,
grow,
that's
they
right.
grow, they grow.
So,
And
well,
go
speaking of
ahead.
your career, how did you get into cybersecurity? Take us back. How did you get into
So
this?
so I started in the tech industry back in Y2K. So it was really kind of one of the things. Well, let me jump on that wagon, right? So
And for our
uh,
younger listeners, Y2K was a big deal at the end of the 1900s. Everybody thought the world was going to come to an end because all
for sure
computers were going to stop working and everything. So Y2K IT
was
preparation was a big deal. Yes.
for sure it was, for sure it was. So and so I was still in the medical field, but I jumped on at that opportunity on in fintech, and so that was pretty big.
And
But what I
fintech
saw.
in financial technology for what types of
For
in the medical
banking,
field?
for banking, banking,
Banking. Yep.
banking. So that was critical.
Hmm.
But I saw from the beginning of it that not everyone who works in an office has tech abilities.
That's true. Yeah.
We think they'll have. Oh yeah, you went to blah blah blah, and you are a master in accounting, let's say.
Hmm.
But it's not the same. It's not the same. So the people sometimes assume that, and the education was really a big part of it from the beginning
Educating
because
people about just good cyber
technology.
hygiene and
Yes,
technology
exactly.
hygiene and things like that. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly, and that was the first one, the first step. Because I remember my second week, I had to do a presentation why we were doing the Y2K. Why was
Right.
that number? Those magic four-digit numbers were
Hmm.
so important.
Hmm.
And well, especially in terms of banking, that was really a big thing. And then it
Right.
started coming up, creeping up on me on other things, and email communications and things like that, and wire instructions. All depends on the
So,
industry.
so wiring money and all those things were coming across in emails and not very secure,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And sometimes we just don't think just because there is a name on that email, that doesn't mean that that's the person, right? So we
That's a very good
started
point.
already seeing that pattern
Hmm.
going. And so we started thinking, well, we need to kind of expand the education because, especially in the banking industry, that
Right.
was critical.
Right.
So that's how the whole thing started. And
Hmm.
so moving on to my latest experience with healthcare, it was kind of the same thing.
Right.
We had COVID results. That's at one point. We have things that they were very critical, especially when people were flying. As
Yeah.
back in 2 or 3 years ago, you were waiting sometimes on the airport, waiting for that COVID result to be negative so you can, jump on the plane. And
Right.
so there was always that critical path. But it was always that awareness they always kind of keep in mind and just be on guard of that.
No, that makes sense.
So that was really what kind of
Right.
triggered the whole education pattern more than the security, because as we all know, technology evolves so much, especially at this time,
That's
and it
true.
will
Well, and
be
now
going
since
forward.
2022 with
Yeah, it's gonna
GPT,
be,
yeah.
yeah, and it's never gonna end, to be honest with you. So we
Yeah.
gotta catch up. And the other part of it, which is that's one of my main goals, and is also educating the elderly, because sometimes we feel like it's kind of like, okay, yeah, we'll keep on the business side, blah blah blah, but it's not all about making money. It's about kind of giving back as well. So
Right.
we keep that separate project to kind of uh, think about, okay, we need to also give that back to community one way or the other. So we
Right.
have the knowledge. Why not just give it? Just
Mhm.
give back on that. And I always remember I was at one point close by right here to where I live, and to a beach town, and I was with my mom,
You're near the
and
ocean. Yeah.
yeah, so I was with my mom, and she was trying to park, and we came to an area that the first of all, the kiosk for the parking payout was not working, and the only way that you could pay was with a QR code.
Uh,
My mom doesn't have a phone with a
right.
QR code, doesn't even know what a QR code is.
Right. Right.
So then I started thinking, well, this is very critical. We are pushing these people, these elderly people, on that environment. They're not even ready.
Hmm.
So that's another point that you always come up, especially when sometimes when I talk to city officials or people that they're in government, just leave some of the stuff to kind of people just get acquainted by it. So
Right.
that's also important.
Different
So
generations have different preferences of
for
how they get
sure,
information, which is why, you know, in a family, you could have the grandparent looking for the hard copy mail and the parent looking for the website and the kids looking for the TikTok, channel or Insta channel or something,
for
all for the
sure,
same information. So
for
it's a very
sure.
interesting time we live in because of that, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Uh,
And we all have, one way or the other,
mhm.
that call from family members say, well, this guy called me and he said he was from Microsoft.
Oh
So
my gosh. If I meet one more person who has paid Microsoft tech support, it's that's one of the
yeah,
biggest things.
no,
Well,
it
and
has
you bring
nothing.
up a good thing because that's a current trend. Let's talk about that a little bit because you've been in cybersecurity and IT protections and security for going on almost 3 decades here. So you've seen a
Mhm.
lot of changes. What are you seeing on the front lines in cyber crime and cyber security issues today that is, that is emerging? Because you see things all the time.
Oh yeah, one of the biggest is that the tools that AI is giving people, the bad guys,
Hmm.
are as good as or better than the ones that the regular people use. So that's one of it. Before we used to catch misspelling or emails that they were not well written.
Hmm.
That's no longer an issue. Uh,
Hmm.
the QR code trap is always a big one that,
Let's talk about that. That's a great point. We haven't really talked about this on the show so far, but a lot of people think, like, I even have a book coming out and I've got my QR code on the back. And being in cybersecurity, I went, should I or shouldn't I? Because all the other books have it. But as cybersecurity people, we warn people about about QR
true,
codes.
true.
Let's tell them now. Let's tell all of our viewers what's the danger of QR codes because you see them everywhere.
Yeah, QR codes are a very quick response. That's really the word for it.
Hmm.
And it was something that it was really simple just to communicate with people, and
Hmm.
it worked out really well
Hmm.
until bad guys figure out, if I can impose that QR code to my QR code,
Right.
I cannot get access to things on their
Now you're
phone.
paying me instead of, oh, like a great example, your mom and the parking meter.
Exactly,
There's all these things where all a criminal has to do is print out stickers with their QR code on it that
exactly.
and put it on top of the city of whatever town you're in, QR
Yes,
code on there, and all of a sudden you think you're paying for parking, but they've set up a duplicate site and you're now paying them.
sure.
Now we're talking about maybe $5 or something, right? But when you get into things where people are paying hundreds or thousands, that's a
For
whole.
sure, sure. Not automatic payments. That's
Mhm.
something that I usually try to. There's a layers. There's
Mhm.
layers of things that you need to kind of be aware of. One of that parking. Let's pretend there is the parking case.
Right. Mhm.
It has an application. That's number one.
Mhm.
Second of all, that application is the one who reads the QR code, or or uh, I usually recommend everyone,
Mhm.
all those charges should be on a very small credit card. I usually recommend get that credit card for $300. Guess what? They get
Because
you
then nobody
$300.
can charge $1,000 to it. It's beyond the
Exactly,
credit limit. Yeah. Mhm.
exactly. And that is really important because really,
Yeah.
risk is going to be everywhere. If they want that
Mhm.
Ferrari, they'll get it. I always tell them that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It will take more time, but they will get it.
Hmm.
But how long does it take to
Right.
get that Ferrari? That's the whole point of how you prevent it. There was an analogy that my professor in that and the university used to tell me, say, you can have two windows. You can have a window with without protection and one with protection. Guess who's they gonna hit when they want to grab something?
Right.
And you need to have that plan.
You
One
want to
other
be
thing.
you want to be an unattractive target, right?
Exactly, exactly. We see properties in some cities that you look at the house and like, whoa, that house is really bad. And then you go inside and it's beautiful. Well, in some cities, that's how you have to work on it. You have
Mhm.
to don't pretend that nothing happens in this area.
Right.
There's nothing to see, move along, like they say in the old movies, right? And it works. And it
Right.
works.
So I like your
So
idea of getting a card limit as 300. A woman who was in my workshop had that happen to her, and she rented her home, and she had gone the night before to a friend's birthday party where there was QR code parking,
yeah,
and she paid for it, and somebody, a hacker had come along, a scammer had come along and put their QR code stickers over all of the meters. So she only paid like $3.25 or whatever it was, but guess what? She had deposited her paycheck in, and then she had written a check for her mortgage that, had gone through. And
Yeah.
of course, the funds were wiped out from the hackers draining her account. And so then her check for her rent bounced and all of that. And she did get her money back, but you have to file a police report to then get in touch with your bank. And in the meantime, her landlord's upset with her. And having gone through, cybercrime myself, which is what got me into it, and all the people you and I see, it's not worth the gray hair that you get from going through
No.
recovering. It's just not. And so I love that idea. Have a special card and, use that for gas too. You're in because the skimmers
Definitely.
on gas stations are another
Definitely.
hazard.
That's another one. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And that really makes a big sense for a lot of things. And to be honest, it really kind of keeps the all the balance in check. One thing that also I want to bring up, that I don't know if it was brought up in other podcasts, but it's really I really kind of always suggest it. Use virtual cards if the bank allows it in some of these transactions.
Oh, tell people about this and how they get them because a lot of people
Yes.
listening don't know what virtual cards are. So,
Yes, and
what are they
unfortunately,
and how do they get them?
not all the banks do it. And I have to say, some of them don't, and I don't know why. Might be some kind of policy in their end that they can't. But a virtual card protects you so much in regards to payments. And we all know we have that provide that product that we tested once, and then it keeps charging every month, and nobody's using it, and then you look back a year ago and say, "How come I'm still paying
You've
nine
paid
ninety five?"
$200 when you thought you were going to just do the 30-day free trial and end it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and it happens all the time. So I usually we usually doing this, and we actually use a lot of testing products as well. We pay
Right.
for the first month, see what
Mhm.
happens, and then we don't have to worry about it. So how it works? The company and that bank will give you a portal, right, with your credit card. And you can actually create virtual cards. And the beauty of those virtual cards is, first of all, it's not the same number as your real credit card.
Right.
Second of all, you can auto lock. And we usually do it like 2, 3 days after the payment, just to make
Right.
sure.
Kind of like
I mean,
freezing your
first,
credit with the credit bureaus,
exactly,
except you're
exactly.
freezing your card. So the company can charge you once, but if they try to do a recurring charge, it's going to be declined.
Exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
And I mean, that works also and saying, okay, do I still need that? Because sometimes, yeah, you really need it. And then, okay, well, let's have at it, unlock it. I don't care. But at least you have the control over those chargers,
Right.
which
So it gives
that
you it
you
gives you a number that's different from your 16-digit Visa number
that's
that you
correct.
use once. Now, the one thing is you can't use them in person. This is for online purchases, correct?
Most of the times, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They don't
Mhm.
give you that, but
Right.
it really, really helps and saving money. And
Exactly.
trust me, I'm a culprit of that. I think we all have,
Yeah.
how many people really just enroll in things that they just don't use. It looks very attractive,
Right.
or, and that's one thing that I always notice too, is you see the charge, and for some reason, and they know this, you start using it because you pay for it already
Uh-huh.
for
It's
one
the
or 2 days.
psychology.
It's like the gym. You see that thing, and oh,
Mhm.
I better go to the gym, and then you go
You
two,
don't
three
want to
days.
cancel because you don't want to be the loser who's not getting in shape. So you like, okay, I'm going to keep paying for it and I'm going to try to make myself go. And then another month goes by and hopefully you get to the gym and get healthy. But yes, we've all been there. That's the human psychology.
Yeah, and they know that also.
Yeah.
So, but those things actually can get you in shape financially for sure, for sure. And it's a coffee. Just think about it. Hey, it's
Right.
another coffee that you're missing out from Starbucks. So
Right.
whatever it is. So
That's
yeah, that's a good one that we actually pass it on all the time.
that is
But
great. That's a great way to protect yourself. And what I love about this, Alex, is you're such an advocate for these very, actionable, easy ways to protect ourselves and stuff. So I'd love to hear for our viewers what other tips you have as best ways to protect ourselves.
Definitely, definitely. We are learning from each other, right? So,
Hmm.
that's one point I always like to talk about. With we give classes in person as well too.
Hmm.
So, because we decide that there is a lot of providers that can do security awareness, but it's complicated. It's
Hmm.
not for everyone. I remember the first time that I went to start taking computer science 101.
Right.
My
Oh yeah.
professor was so slow that I was like, oh, if I need to do this like for all these quarters, I'm gonna be exhausted.
It's
And
painful. It is very painful to learn
it's
cybersecurity.
yeah, well, no, computers by
Well,
itself.
computer science is mind numbing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to realize is no, not everybody's in it, and that's one thing that, yes, we have technology all over, but
Mhm.
some people just they just want to grab it and just go. I just
Yeah.
want that thing to work, and then I go to work, and I totally get it
Hmm.
because I did, and throughout my career I've seen genius in
Hmm.
chemistry, genius in PhDs, master bioscientology people that they
Hmm.
they love what they do, and that's what we do. We love what we do, and that's what we do,
Right.
or else we wouldn't really,
We wouldn't do
because
it. That's true.
it's so frustrating in a way. You
Hmm.
look at people just installing, I remember, software that it doesn't work for 200 times and say, well, you have to love this. That's the only way you do
Right.
it.
Right.
So that's
Hmm.
important to kind of differentiate that and make sure that they understand it. Sometimes the best way to get a breakthrough is, okay, so what do? You do this job. Okay, relate that security to that job that they do and what the risks they're taking if they don't do let's say construction. What is the first thing that you do when you go into a construction site? Okay, you put your yellow hat on because that's the
Yeah.
best
Put a
way.
hard hat on to protect your head, right? So.
Exactly. So the same thing with security. This is what you need to do in order for you to be protected on that.
Hmm.
And we always encourage, just pass it on, get it, give it to your family. Just keep that. We give flyers all the time, and we try to do the best to also just cover the community because that's very important. And as you know, that is one of the biggest risks because we're all gonna be there. That's the
Right.
thing. We're all gonna be 80, 90. We're gonna be somewhere, and we're not gonna stand things,
Hmm.
and I hope there's always that kind of people that will push through, kind of educate you or protect you. And
Right.
sometimes that's it. Because the wallet
So,
will get you some, I mean, not that much, and then after a while, it's like, oh, what is it that you have done in your life? So
right.
really,
So what's one of the tips? What's another tip that's on those flyers and the things you hand out to help everybody protect themselves?
uh, we usually try the simple approach, and so when you doubt, you call. That's the thing. Pick up the phone. Just
Like,
pick up the phone and call.
so
Let's say
call. So like if you
you
get a
got
text, like what's an example?
exactly. Or let me call you back. And that's another one. Because
Mhm.
sometimes you feel like that's not that, or what's going on with that? Oh, you know what? Let me call you back. Trying to pretend to be busy. Like, let me call you back because you know what? I got bad reception there.
Hmm. Which
That.
which is good because a lot of us, people are want to be polite and hackers will take advantage of that. But you don't have to be rude. You don't have to hang up on people.
No,
You can say you can tell them, let me call you back and then but don't call them back on the number they called you on. Look up, make sure you're calling them at the number of your bank or the number of the DMV or whomever
for sure.
they're pretending to be.
Yes, and yes, and another thing is also, and all CEOs have the same problem, right? They grab the name and they send out things, and someone is going to catch on, and they're going to say, "Oh yeah, I got to respond right away," and you always can give that kind of like, okay, let me call you from a land or from a phone line that is more stable, or you know
Right.
what, there's going to be a lot of noise. You can be polite, you can pretend that there's other things that are happening in the environment just to make sure that you provide them with that, and then companies will appreciate that even
Right.
if that
So you're
person
talking
is
about
in
when
a
you're at work,
branch.
if your boss or boss's boss or somebody senior. If you get
Exactly.
it, well, and let's talk about that because business email compromise is the number one thing that takes down
For
companies.
sure.
So
For
business,
sure.
tell people what is business email compromise?
Business compromise is most of the times on it's, messaging or on emails, and most likely will be a report or something that it will trigger urgency, and that's the key urgency. I need this report because I have a meeting in the next 5 minutes.
Hmm.
And that is the case. And then you call exactly, or you, first of all, if you can, check his calendar because most of these CEOs, they have open calendars because they do have, so you can check on it. But if you don't, you call him or you call the secretary or the assistant and tell him, hey, is that a meeting going on in that direction? And he only takes a
So
second.
verify before sending, right?
Exactly, exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. And most likely it is a scam because people who are at that level, they are prepared. As you know, that's why they got to that level.
Right.
So, so yeah, don't
But
worry
I will
about my
say, because I
agency.
work with a lot of C-suite executives and CEOs, unfortunately, and I've sat in a few C-suites myself as a C-suite executive. You do have rushes, you have things, but
Oh,
if the
definitely.
behavior of the C-suite is that do this for me, jump and and fetch this and jump for that, you're actually setting up the behavioral patterns that are helping criminals hurt your company
For
on
sure.
your watch, and it's your responsibility. So for anybody listening who's a manager or an executive or a business owner, and that's about half of our listeners, um, you really you it starts with you. So you've got
For
to
sure.
tell people, if I'm asking for something like this, I need you to verify. I expect you to verify it. So you have to give them permission because nobody wants to challenge the boss or get in trouble by not being responsive to an executive. So, the more that
For
you can
sure.
show, hey, absolutely, I want to help you to make sure this is you because I've been learning a lot about cybersecurity lately. I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing for the company. I'm just going to verify this, and then go to another channel, right?
For sure. For sure.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, one thing that I always want to mention is this is going to be happening for a long time. Well, we got to get
Mhm.
used to it,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
right.
This is not going to go away in any
Mhm.
way, shape, or form. The money on the table, it's a lot, and people know that.
Right.
And as you know, our dollar is really, in a high value. So that's another
Mhm.
thing that we have to look after.
Mhm.
What we
Me-
think sometimes is, a small amount for and unfortunately internet is international for
mhm.
other people it's a lot of money. It
Right.
is a lot of money and people just have the time,
Yeah.
they have
A,
the
a,
time to do it.
a day's parking on a meter can feed a family for a week in certain places of the
for,
world. So it's like you said,
for sure, for
cybercrime is not
sure,
going anywhere anytime soon. So, yeah.
for sure. And I seen that, like, I remember the last one that we saw on hijacking data, and it was a very bad hacking.
Mhm.
They were there for 6 months inside the
Mhm.
network.
Yes.
6 months.
Yeah. And that's the
That's,
average, isn't it, Alex? The average is I've seen 2 months through 9 months
depends.
even. Yeah.
Yeah. And I seen, there was one case that I was really, really kind of feel for them because they had really bad legal advice, and they were a very big plastic surgeon consultants, and they were doing a lot of money, a
Hmm.
lot of money. They were building their own building
Hmm.
across the street, just to give you an idea. And in 6 months, they ruined their reputation. They lost the loan on that building, and they
Wow.
lost the company.
And that was from hackers.
Yeah, yeah,
So what
yeah.
happened? How did that happen?
So hackers stay there for I think it was like 5 months,
Hmm.
according with the logs that we seen, and because they were doctors, They receive the email and they want Bitcoins, obviously. Uh, Lawyers say, no, don't pay them.
So this is for a
Uh,
ransomware demand.
Very big one, very big
Yeah.
one. So they say, well, if you don't do it, it's going to hurt. They didn't say how, but they start spending a lot of money in lab results that they didn't do. But, labs take it and just bill you. They don't care.
Hmm.
Um, then they start messing around with medication, which it did happen, but they were like, wait a minute, how come you're doubling this low dosage in that person?
So they were actually
Uh,
changing patients' prescriptions because they could.
yeah, yeah.
That's
And then
very dangerous, obviously.
yeah, well, yeah, it didn't really go through there because there are
Hmm.
checkpoints on that regards, but they show their power, they show their muscle.
Yeah.
And so that's what they did. They actually accomplished to ruin their reputation in 3 months. The bank say, well, you're doing a building here, but we're going to pull the loan on you because
Hmm.
I really don't know what's happening. So in 3 months, that firm was gone
Wow.
in three
That Now that's
months.
a cautionary tale both for business owners and for people with a lot of money to protect, but also for those of us who are, the customers and clients and
For
patients
sure.
of small offices. We've talked about that periodically on here, but that's the other thing. A lot of small businesses are number one targets and because they're the least secure and they have a lot of
Sure.
assets, right? So
Sure.
when we all deal with small businesses, we all, if
For sure.
you're either an owner, but if you're not, you do business. It could be your accountant, your vet, your plastic surgeon, as you're talking about. It could be your doctor's office. What should consumers be thinking about asking their, what should they be
That's
asking
that's a
their
great question
providers?
because that is such a great question because uh, I
Whoops, hold
do
on
it
a second. You know
myself.
what? Hold on one second. I froze in that, so let's just redo that real quick. So
Sure.
let me just re-ask that question. So, what should we as consumers be asking the small businesses we do business with, whether that's our vets or our tax preparers or our plastic surgeons or our doctor's offices, to ensure that our information in their systems is secure? What are the questions we should ask to make sure that they're taking our data seriously?
That is a great question because I battle with myself with that one all the time.
Hmm.
And so just because they give you a form to fill out, you should question every answer on that. Let me give an example.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't give my social security to my dentist. They have my insurance card. You want to charge it? Charge it there.
Right.
You
They
you
don't need
they,
it. They don't
they
need it.
don't need it. They don't need
Right.
it.
Right.
They where I live. You have my
Mhm.
ID. You wanna reach out to me. You got my phone number.
Right.
So question everything that you answer because
Hmm.
the issue with that is um, small offices the routines sometimes are not as secure as we think it is.
Right.
They don't have the money to buy this firewall that is really expensive, and then and sometimes they just do what they can, and I'm not
Right.
blaming anyone, but
Right.
you
But
have your budget.
it's not their core business. If you're there trying to
Exactly.
help dogs and cats and or do people's taxes, you're not putting this. The only small business that you could trust has a higher level of cybersecurity is a cybersecurity small business. So
Exactly. 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 And that's one thing I always do. I say, no, you don't need this, you don't need that. And if you do, why?
right,
Why you need it? Why you need it?
right, right.
So that really kind of
You bring up
and
a good
sometimes
point. I never put my social security number in, and only once had anybody say, "Well, I have to have something." And she was a kind of like an intern. She did, she just knew that her job that she was told that she needed to put something in there. So I just said,
Mhm.
"Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9," and she put it in, and I never heard a complaint. It's just because they need a unique ID number, so give them 555 44 3333. They don't care. They just need something to put in there, and it's the only time you don't do that is if you're on a government site or attacks or something where they're going to verify your identity with it. But come on, you're veterinarian, you're plastic surgeon. That's not what they're asking for. So,
Exactly, exactly. And just to put a little joke in there, I always put A675-309 because that's
which for those of you who are old enough to know, that's a famous line from a song that was popular back in what was that, the 80s or something. So it's a
yeah,
famous phone number that people what over 45 can sing back to you. They all know that phone number. So that's great. That's very funny. I like that.
yeah, yeah.
So, and then, so one last question too. You deal a lot with cyber insurance and cyber insurance audits. We really haven't spoken about cyber insurance on this
yeah,
show yet. So
yeah,
let's have this be our kind of our final topic for everybody. But what
for
do
sure.
viewers who are heads of families and working professionals need to know about cyber insurance? And what do you think? What would you tell them is the value of it? Who needs it and why?
Yeah, I will definitely go over with my insurance carrier and ask questions,
Mhm.
and with a caution on it. I mean, when you're talking with an agent one sales. I get it, I get
Mhm.
it,
Mhm.
but it depends on what kind of business you have. You should explore. I will say,
Right. So if you have a business, definitely because you want the protections.
you
Mhm.
should, and just reach out to as many people, even with your colleagues. What is it that you're doing, how you're doing it, and what is the best way to approach it. And if you're running a business, you want to be covered one way or the other. Sometimes you don't have that many records, so you don't even have privacy sometimes on what the business that you do.
Right.
If you're a construction person, probably not that much, and you want to emphasize in a lot of other things, but you still need that because you might deal with vendors
Right.
that that requires that, and at
Mhm.
one point or another, they're gonna ask you for it. So that's
Right.
another thing. And sometimes your natural business doesn't need it because, like, oh, I'm selling knickknacks,
Right.
whatever.
But if
Uh,
you're in somebody's supply chain, they're going to
exactly,
require certain insurance
exactly,
from you, and one of them is going to be cyber. I just
exactly.
I just spoke at a credit union leaders conference, and most credit unions that have problems, 75% of the issues come from their supply chain. So they have to audit their supply chain. So if you are in somebody's pipeline, you are going to
For
be
sure.
asked for, they're going to audit you and they're going to want to know what you have and what protections you have. And having cyber insurance not only covers you, but it covers them and is a requirement.
Exactly,
Yeah, that's it.
exactly.
What
And
about
I would def
individual families too? Like, there's a lot of like people always asking, should I use LifeLock or Aura or what should I do for my personal protection?
I,
What advice do you have on that?
yeah, I would say education is a big part of it, to be honest with you. I
Just
spend quite a
educating yourself on
educating, and I actually also, this is a big topic also, is uh the process on when you actually fall for a scam like that is shame. That's the first
mm,
one, right?
right, right,
So what happens is you need to have that conversation with family members. Don't feel ashamed of it. Everybody or a lot of people have fall for it. And
right,
that will keep the door open to actually say, hey, you know what? I messed up.
right.
And really that's, I hear a lot of those
So don't try to
cases that
hide the fact
don't
that you
try
made
to
a
hide
mistake.
it.
Ex
Exactly.
expose it and
Expose
get help.
expose it. I say, hey, like I say, my mom has
Mhm.
may call sometimes. Hey, this guy from Microsoft called me,
Yeah,
and I go, no, mom, just call me. Don't worry about it.
right.
I will take care of it. And I sometimes get calls also. Hey, it's the micro, and I say, really?
Yeah. Well, you bring up a good point because there is a shame there. When I got hacked before I got into cybersecurity, I felt a lot of shame about, oh my gosh, how you feel stupid or that you've done something stupid. And I remember that. But I've been helping people for a decade now, and you've been in this business for decades. I think the key thing that everybody needs to know is there is zero correlation between your intelligence and whether or
No.
not you've been hacked. In fact, I've helped some top Silicon Valley leaders who were like Mensa smart. They're in the top 2% of IQ in the world. And these are executives at companies like Google and Microsoft and all these companies.
Yes.
Anybody can get hacked because what you were talking
Anybody.
about before, the psychology, you can get anybody, the smartest person in the world, if you get them
Yes.
into a panic, fight or flight state, and
Yes.
they're thinking urgent, you're not using your best thinking. So all your knowledge and your best thinking is going to fail you then. And that's because you're human, not because you're not intelligent.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. If the audience also wants to double check and see how how smart those people are, and
Mhm.
unfortunately in that topic, check out there's a 60-minute note on a federal agent who his son called him at 2 o'clock in the morning and he
Mm,
sent the money. And he
right.
actually used to work for cyber crimes
Right. And
because he was at
he got hacked by an AI video clone of his son because yeah. So it can
exactly,
happen to
and
anybody. Yeah.
it can happen. And then when he sent the money, he said, "Oh,
Oh no. Yeah.
yes."
Yeah. Right. They got me.
So that gives you the
So if it can
level of
happen to
sophistication.
him, you shouldn't feel ashamed if something happens to you. Come out.
No, not at all. Just
Oh,
put it out there. Put it out
that
there
is
for sure.
great. That is a great reminder. And Alex, for people who tell people a little bit about what you do and who you work with and how people can reach you.
So we are based on the security training, but in a very big different approach. We do have a lot of help for with a lot of vendors. They're doing videos and stuff like that. But we realize also that there is a lot of people that they need a little bit more detail, or they have more questions, or they just there is a lot of, even though if you try to simplify, sometimes it doesn't click. And I totally get it. Try me to disassemble an engine. I'll be like for years working on
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So we actually do one-on-ones. We do in-person also training. So we have our partners that we give training with, but we
And do
also
you only
give
work with
direct.
businesses or do you also work with consumers?
No, we actually have a different program for that,
Okay.
but that one is free, and
Mhm.
we are working on opening all that entity by ourselves to make sure that also that the senior community is aware of it, and we wanted to try to dedicate also spending a lot more time on that, but that's on the works. But we are working on that. So our main core business is to educate people and give them the extra layer to give them the answers that they need for clarifications. Talk about MFA. If you really never got exposed to it, it's complicated. It's like
Mhm.
you got 3 or 4 steps.
Right.
One
If you've
guy
never done
was,
it, it's your first time. It can be a little
yeah, I
overwhelming.
mean,
Mhm.
I got a joke about my brother the other day. He was telling me, you know what? I'm so done with technology. I want to put a tattoo with my password for Bank of America so I remember it. And I get it.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
because really, it's how many passwords you need on this and that and blah.
Right,
It's annoying. It's
right.
annoying. So we try to kind of take care of that anxiety and make sure that the idea clicks. I say, oh, okay, now I get it. Because it takes time, like everything else. Hey, we learn how to ride a bicycle when we were young, but how many times we fall? A lot of times. So it's a matter
So
of keep
Alex,
at it.
for people, sorry, let's start over. Hold on. So Alex, so for businesses that want to work with you and your company, it's 911datahelp.com.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
you help what? You help their employees get
And
safer and help
extra
protect the
later,
company.
yeah. And let's make sure that I also always do say that is you need to educate all of them, and I tell you why.
Mhm,
If if you're a hacker, one of the things that they usually do if you want to start getting some intelligence in person,
mhm,
you actually start talking with a receptionist because
mhm,
she knows everything.
mhm.
You don't need to go to the CEO.
Right.
You just talk to her and say, hey, what's happening? I
Mhm,
brought you some donuts. I work across the street and I
mhm.
saw you there. Oh, you got a nice car or whatever.
Uh-huh.
That's how you get it. So everyone in the team needs to be coordinated and just be aware of the things can happen.
So you help educate the employees across the
Exactly.
entire organization,
Yeah, of course.
so they
And
can help protect the company. That's great.
we even
Awesome.
drop USB keys sometimes.
Mhm.
We buy a bunch of them, we throw it away, and we start seeing things. I'm like, yeah, see, look at how easy it is. It's not that complicated.
Right.
You know?
That's great.
Yeah.
That's so great. Well, Alex, I can't believe our time is already up, but this is so great. Thank you. You've given us some great tips. So we've got the $300 credit card max that you can use for parking and gas stations, things like that. We talked about really wanting to have your whole, just all your protections in place to protect yourself. And this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for your great advice, and thank
One
you for the
more.
work you do.
I want to give you one more that I think
Great.
it's also important, and it's very simple. Don't use your middle name in all the forms. They don't need it. They don't care. Just yeah, just use the first name. That's it. That will actually, they can find it if they take the time for it, for sure. But it's another threshold that you can kind of prevent it.
That's awesome. That is great. That's great advice. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
So
All
that's
right.
great. Well, this has been great. So everybody, you've got some great tips, and thanks to Alex Sansevieri of 911datahelp.com. And until next time, stay safe out there.
Thank you.